Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the work of Dr. David Hawkins, a spiritual researcher who did something pretty radical. He tried to create a map of consciousness itself. His whole argument was that spiritual truth isn't just some nice idea, but a reality you can actually experience and even measure. So, Dr. Hawkins kicks things off with this really cool idea. He's not presenting a belief system. He's framing his work as like a report from a new territory. He compares himself to an explorer, Marco Polo, who has actually been there and is just coming back to describe the landscape. It's not about being some guru, it's about sharing that undeniable certainty that only comes from direct personal experience. And that really gets you thinking, right? This question is at the heart of everything he taught. What if we're all going about this the wrong way? What if spirituality is less about what you think in your head and more about a journey, a place you can actually get to? Okay, let's really dig into this, because this distinction is the foundation of his entire work. He draws this incredibly sharp line between what he calls a provisional belief and the absolute certainty you get from direct experience. So on one side, you've got belief. He says this is all secondhand info, it's tentative, and because you haven't really experienced it for yourself, you tend to get dogmatic about it. I love his phrasing here, you're hanging on by your fingernails. But then, on the other side, you have experience. And that's not an idea, that's a deep inner knowingness. It's a revelation that brings its own authority with it. So, how do you make that jump from just believing something to actually knowing it? Well, Hawkins says it takes a huge shift in who you think you are. He argues the whole point of spiritual work isn't to improve the small s self. Our ego, our personality. No, the real goal is to realize that you're something so much bigger, the capital S self, that silent, powerful source of life that's already inside all of us. Okay, so if this greater self is already in there, what's blocking us from seeing it? For Hawkins, the answer is super clear. The number one obstacle is the ego. And the ego, well, it only knows one way to operate. It's got this very forceful yang approach to everything. It treats enlightenment like any other goal out there in the world, something you have to achieve through effort. It's constantly telling us, strive, push harder, go out and get spiritual awareness. But here's the big twist. That whole way of thinking, it's a complete misunderstanding. According to Hawkins, spiritual reality isn't something you go out and get. It's something you allow to be revealed. The real work isn't about adding more effort, it's about removing the barriers that are already in the way. And his take on this whole struggle is actually really compassionate. He says we shouldn't beat ourselves up over the ego. It's not a personal failing, it's just an evolutionary tool, a survival program that we've all inherited. In his eyes, we're all innocent victims of our own egos, and the game is just to learn how to move beyond its limits. Now let's keep building on this, because the ego's fatal flaw, its biggest limitation, is that it just can't tell the difference between how things look and how they really are. This leads to a pretty shocking conclusion. Hawkins argues, pretty bluntly, that the human mind, just on its own, is basically incapable of telling truth from falsehood. It gets dazzled by appearances, and it gets lost in its own stories and perceptions. And get this, he actually puts a number on this problem. His research showed, as you can see right here, that a whopping 78% of the world's population is operating below the level of integrity and truth. He said that being bombarded by this much falsehood makes it incredibly hard to find your bearings in the modern world. So if our own minds are unreliable and we're swimming in a sea of falsehood, how in the world are we supposed to navigate? This is where Hawkins introduces his most famous and, let's be honest, his most controversial tool, a calibrated scale of consciousness. So what he created is basically a map of human consciousness on a scale from 1 to 1,000. And using his methods, he assigned a number to everything, emotions, concepts, books, you name it, based on how aligned it is with truth. So you can see here something like pride calibrates at 175, but a powerful state like love is way up there at 500. The whole point is to have an objective tool to see the true essence of something, completely bypassing the ego's biased opinion. But out of all those numbers, there's one you really need to pay attention to, and it's 200. He called this the level of courage. This is the critical tipping point. Anything that calibrates below 200 is fundamentally negative, destructive, and false. Anything above 200 is life-affirming, constructive, and aligned with truth. It is the great dividing line. So now you have this map, but the goal isn't to use it to just run away from a world that for the most part calibrates as false. The real goal is to completely change your relationship to it. And he makes this really key distinction. The path isn't detachment, that can be cold, cut off, it's non-attachment. And what that means is you can fully participate in life, but you're not controlled by it. You're not desperate for certain outcomes or terrified of others. You, as he puts it, wear the world like a light garment. And this isn't all just high-level theory either. He lays out some timeless, practical tools that anyone can use to cultivate this state. Things like prayer and devotion help you stay open, while surrender and contemplation are ways to bring these spiritual lessons into your life moment by moment. And finally, this brings us to this really powerful idea that kind of flips the script on the whole spiritual search. Hawkins suggests that if you feel drawn to this stuff, it isn't just because you're running away from your past or trying to fix old traumas. No, it's because you're being pulled forward by your own future, by a destiny that's calling you to a higher level of awareness. And so we're left with this one last thought to chew on. If it's true, if we are actually being attracted by the future, then the most important question for any of us isn't about what we're running from. It's about what we're running to. What destiny is calling you?